It is a wonderful Sunday, and I'm bringing you 3 scary hiking stories. And with that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. I make it a point to hike at least once a week, regardless of the weather. Snow, rain, heat. I dress accordingly and head into nature to reclaim some semblance of sanity for 7 more days. It's usually enough to get me through my awful job and keeps me on an even keel. This week is the first time in years I haven't gone. After last week, I don't know that I ever will again. Last Sunday, I took a hike at one of my favorite spots. Wooded, serene, and largely void of other people. It smells richly of pine and decaying leaves. And even in the summer heat, the dense canopy keeps it cool enough to be comfortable. It's a 3-mile loop, which usually takes me just under an hour to complete. I start out at 10 a.m. Unfortunately for me, the unusually empty trail was much busier than usual. About 15 minutes into my hike, I came across a trio of middle-aged women. They walked slowly, 3 abreast, just far enough apart to make squeezing by without interaction impossible. Their shrill conversation and laughter seemed better suited to happy hour than a walk through the woods. "Excuse me," I said politely, trying to squeeze by them. Oblivious, the woman gave me no notice and continued laughing. Not trusting myself to ask nicely again, I moved off to the side, off the trail, and walked around them. "Oh, I'm sorry," one of the women said, finally noticing that they had been holding somebody up. I didn't respond and picked up my pace. Within 5 minutes, I had left them and their banal conversation behind. I decided to take an extension loop I had never tried before. It would add about 2 miles to my hike. But I was finding my usual routine didn't have the calming effect I had hoped for. This loop provided more elevation gain and more quiet. No rustle of leaves, no birds, no chipmunks. The trees were less dense, but the air was even colder than the thick of the forest I had just been in. I felt completely isolated and alone. It's exactly what I had hoped for. Before I knew it, I was back out onto the original loop. It seemed like I had barely been on the other loop at all, and I began to wonder if I had maybe missed part of the trail when an older man with walking sticks approached me. "Excuse me, have you seen 3 women out here?" he asked. "Yeah, they were here 10 minutes behind me before I took this extension. They separated from the group a while ago and we can't seem to find them," he said with a bit of concern. "I'll let you know you're looking for them if I see them," I assured him. He nodded and moved back in the direction they had been traveling. Not even 10 minutes later, a group of 6 people in various hiking gear approached me on the trail. "We're looking for 3 women. Have you seen them?" I repeated what I had told the first gentleman and moved on. Shortly after, I came to the trailhead, where yet another group of people was waiting to ask me about the women. "Do you know where you saw them last?" A younger man asked me on the phone. "Maybe 40 minutes ago?" "Someone saw them 40 minutes ago," he repeated into the phone. "Were they on the trail?" Yes, they were both on the north side of the trail where it runs along the creek. Since that was the most extent of what I could offer, I headed out to my car. I tossed my hydration pack in the back seat and started it. The air blasted on, and so did the radio. Then I caught a glimpse of the time. 4:05 p.m. What the F? I thought to myself. There's no way that is right. I checked my phone. 4:05 p.m. I'd been out for 6 hours. That's at least 4 hours longer than it should have taken me. Puzzled and more than a bit panicked, I headed home. The 3 women and their various search parties were forgotten. All I could think of is those lost 4 hours. Once home, I started to Google lost time to see what could have happened to me. That's when I got a notification that my recent photos had backed up. I saw a flash of a photo I didn't recognize, so I took a closer look. It was a photo of one of the women. She was terrified, bloodied. Her mouth was frozen in a scream. My heart seemed to stop beating for a minute. I realized it was one of my many new photos. Seemingly on autopilot, I flipped through them. Photo after photo is of these women, brutalized, covered in blood. Their wild despair is palpable and heart-wrenching. Each photo was worse than the last. Just when I thought it couldn't be more horrified, I got to the last photo. It was a selfie. I was posing with one of the women. I'm smiling brightly. Her head is partially caved in, her light brown hair caked with blood and her eyes swollen shut. That's when I threw up. After hastily cleaning up that mess, I deleted the photos off my phone and took a stiff drink of scotch. I have spent the last week unsuccessfully trying to recall even one detail other than those I have shared with you. They haven't found those women yet. I don't know what happens when they do. I don't know what happened at all. I just know it's probably only a matter of time before someone other than me wants answers. I grew up in a beautiful area with lots of forests near a mountain. I won't say where. It is only fair for my story to impact the whole area I grew up in and still love. But I could never go back there, no matter how hard I tried. I came home from college for the weekend, overwhelmed with the newness of university life. I decided to clear my head and go for a hike. So, I borrowed my mom's car and drove up the mountain a bit, to go on a hiking trail I'd never been on before. It was a gray, drizzly day, but I figured I could deal with it. When I pulled into the small parking area, there was only one other car. I figured with the dark, creepy weather, no one wanted to be hiking. I pulled on a raincoat and my backpack and set off. It was a nice hike, really, if a bit dark. The trees were densely packed together, and the mesmerizing pattern of their trunks huddled together seemed to go on for miles. I hiked silently, lost in the thought about school, when I realized that I had somehow gotten off the trail and was standing in the middle of the woods, completely lost. To make matters worse, it was quickly growing dark, the sunlight growing dimmer by the minute. I pushed down the rising panic in my throat, rationalizing that I couldn't possibly be that far from the trail. I turned around, looking for the trail, when I heard something come from the other side of a large boulder. forests, obviously, are generally pretty noisy. The weird thing about this place was really how quiet it was. I hadn't even heard a squirrel, and those little things seemed to be everywhere. This noise was sort of a squelching noise. It was almost like someone eating a very rare steak. Following that, I hear a strange grunting, like an animal that was incredibly desperate for food. I wondered at first if this was a bear or a cougar, both of which could kill me with a single swipe of an oversized paw. But this was a different noise, not a normal animal sound. It freaked me out, triggering some very deep evolutionary fear in me, making all the hair stand on end and sending cold ice running down my spine. Suddenly, I remembered the car I had seen in the small lot at the trailhead, and my stomach clenched. What if the hiker had gotten attacked, and was being mauled right on the other side of this boulder? I had to at least try and help, right? Or at least see what happened so I could call search and rescue. Without thinking much more, I inched around the boulder towards the noise, then gasped. Hunched on the ground was a man in a bright yellow rain jacket. He was barefoot and was wearing shorts despite the cold. On the ground in front of him was a human body, although that was all I could tell about this person. Intestines were splayed all over the ground, as if thrown aside in desperation. Chunks of flesh were missing from the legs, like they had been bitten and torn out. The face was the worst part. The skin had been peeled away to show a bloody skull. The eyes still gazed up into the sky in glassy horror. A long-hauled hunting knife was sticking out of his mouth, covered in blood. I had never seen so much, even in movies. The figure hunched over him was holding a severed arm, gnawing on it hungrily. His face was covered in blood and bits of flesh. His hair was matted, and twigs were sticking out of it every which way. His eyes were a piercing blue and wild with hunger. When he heard my gasp, he looked up, his crazed eyes making my throat clench. He stood up and let out a blood-curdling scream, almost like a howl, and I bolted. Somehow, I found the trail, and I ran as fast as I could, never once turning around. I got back to the parking lot, my stomach twisting when I saw the abandoned car. Got in and drove away as fast as I could. The police didn't believe me at first, figuring I'd been on shrooms, but they went to check it out. They found the abandoned car in the parking lot and looked around in the woods. Here I told them I'd seen the man. They found the abandoned car in the parking lot and looked around in the woods where I told them I'd seen the man. They found the boulder smeared with blood and called in reinforcements. After a 12-day manhunt, the police never did find the man in the yellow coat. They did find a small cave that had a backpack and a sort of nest made from dead leaves and tree limbs, as well as 3 human skulls. One belonged to the hiker who owned the car. The second, a man who had gone missing 4 months prior. And the third was a woman who had gone missing with her husband during the summer. The police assumed that this was a wild cannibal's first victim. The local newspaper published an article with a photo of the first victim and her husband, both smiling at the top of the ridge with a spectacular view. Both smiling at the top of a ridge with a spectacular view of a dark green forest. Her husband was wearing a bright yellow rain jacket. Daniel and I have been friends since middle school. It's a relationship that was initially formed by proximity. Our surnames start with the same letter, so we're always seated next to each other. And sustained by the relentless grindstones of time. Honestly, the guy can be a real pain in the ass. In fact, I would say that it's his default setting. And so I wasn't terribly surprised when 5 minutes into the hike, he went plunging off into the underbrush, completely disregarding the spray-painted blazes that marked the way. "Dude, you're supposed to be on the goddamn trail!" I shouted after him half-heartedly. "The trail can suck my D," came the faint response, partially muffled by his crashing footsteps. Like I said, default setting. I spent a moment relishing the peace and quiet that inevitably descended when Daniel was out of earshot. Then, somewhat reluctantly, I shouldered my backpack and went to follow him. The guy has a lousy sense of direction and no clue about proper woodland behavior. And I didn't relish the thought of having to call the rangers out to rescue him. I stepped off the path and my boots sunk into the loamy earth, which immediately released a thick cloud that minges. It took a surprise amount of effort to lift my feet from the clinging muck. I'd hiked up Gwalian Mountain by myself and with others many times before. This is my first time with Daniel, though, and it was a difficult hike. This was the first time I'd ever disregarded the trail, and I wish I hadn't done it. It was easy to follow Daniel's destructive passage through the woods. Broken sticks and trampled leaves littered his wake. If I stopped and listened, I could hear him faintly in the distance, whooping and shouting incoherently. The air was spicy and spilled sap and the musty odor of overturned stones. The trees started to come more closely together and curved over my head, their leaves blocking the sky. It was as if I were walking through a forest cathedral. Even the birds maintained a respectful silence. All I could hear was my own increasingly labored breath and the soft suck of the mud beneath my feet. Then I realized I couldn't hear Daniel anymore. I stopped walking and strained my ears for the slightest sound. Nothing. How long had I been following this idiot? It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. Yet, the air was suffused with a distinctly unseasonable chill, and I realized that I could no longer clearly see my hands in front of me. "Daniel! Daniel!" I shouted. My voice died in the still, humid air. Nothing to do but continue to follow his footsteps. Now larger and deeper, and oddly distinct in the half-light of the forest. They led to a small clearing and then abruptly stopped, as though Daniel had been whisked up into the air. There was something small and gleaming in front of the last print, and I knelt down to identify it. A neat pile of bone-white pebbles, stacked with obvious care and intent. A cairn. I can't really describe to you the sheer magnitude of the dread that squeezed my throat and stomach in its iron fist. I tore my gaze away and up, anywhere but that evil little collection of stones, and found myself gazing at what was hanging directly above my head. A shirt, jacket, and jeans hung neatly from the tip of an overhanging branch, swaying gently in the relentless breeze. The jeans had been tucked carefully into a pair of muddy hiking boots. Daniel's boots. A bright beam suddenly lit up the clearing and I spun around, afraid and disoriented. Daniel was shining his flashlight into my face. "Dude, Mark, are you okay? I was looking for you, bro." Daniel peered closely at me. His face creased in an unfamiliar expression of concern. I saw..." I stammered, managing to flail my arm upwards. Daniel followed my gesture with his flashlight, illuminating a branch bare of leaves or anything resembling clothing. "You saw what?" he asked, skepticism and the usual rudeness creeping back into his voice. I managed to direct my gaze downwards, and flinched involuntarily when I saw that the cairn was still there. "Oh, that!" said Daniel. He began to chuckle. "Like it? That's some Blair Witch stuff right there." My unexplained dread was beginning to dissipate into annoyance at Daniel, and the more commonplace fear of being lost in the middle of an unfamiliar forest. "You're an idiot," I told him. "Why the hell did you go off the trail? Now I have no idea where the hell we are." "Don't worry," he replied. He began to walk briskly off. "The campground's only about 5 minutes from here." I followed him. What else was I supposed to do? It was so dark now that I could see nothing except Daniel's flickering light. He strode ahead in silence, occasionally sweeping his light back and forth across the ground behind him. For my benefit, I suppose. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't quite articulate it. At some point, we must have retained the trail, because soon we were walking up the familiar steps that led to the campground, and the viewing platform as well. Not that we were going to get any spectacular views at this time of night. Daniel's voice came out of the darkness. "Come on, help me build a fire." I wondered why he had turned off the flashlight, and then I had realized what had bothered me before, as he had illuminated the path in front of me and behind him on our way to the campground. He left no footprints behind him. The marshy ground had remained undisturbed. I tried to speak very calmly. "In a bit, man. Gonna set up my tent now." "All right," came the soft reply. By some small miracle of muscle memory, I got my tent set up in the pitch dark in record time, then crawled in. Some instinct warned me against switching on my own flashlight. It didn't matter anyway. I still saw the cairn, glimmering like bone in the middle of my flimsy adobe. So, I'm typing this on a phone whose battery is rapidly diminishing. Yes, I've tried to contact the police, but my call failed, and I wouldn't know what to tell them anyways. Somehow, I was able to access the internet, but I don't have much hope that will ever be seen. It's still standing out there, waiting, toying with me. Sometimes I hear its rapid footsteps circling me at a gallop. Other times, it runs long fingers down the outside of my tent. Hey everyone, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and hit that bell notification if you haven't. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and even donate to my Patreon if you're feeling generous. Thank you.